The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, which should have been my first clue that everything was about to change. Normal people don't call at 11:30 unless someone's in the hospital or the house is burning down. I was sitting in my leather chair, nursing a whiskey and pretending to read engineering reports, when the shrill sound cut through the silence. "Jonathan Waverly?" The voice was female, cultured, with just a hint of strain around the edges. "Speaking." I glanced toward the staircase, but Michelle's bedroom door remained closed. She'd gone to bed early again, claiming another headache. Third time this week. "My name is Elizabeth Walsh. I believe we need to talk." The name meant nothing to me, but something in her tone made me sit up straighter. "About what?" "About my husband, Richard Thornton, and your wife." The whiskey glass froze halfway to my lips. Richard Thornton. Michelle's boss at Pinnacle Marketing. The man she'd been working late for, traveling with, talking about constantly for the past 6 months. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," I said, though my gut already knew there hadn't been. "No misunderstanding, Mr. Waverly. I have photographs, hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages." Her voice was steady, professional, like she was reading from a grocery list. "Your wife has been pursuing my husband quite aggressively. Successfully, I'm afraid." I set the whiskey down carefully, my engineering mind automatically cataloging details. The way Michelle had started dressing differently. New lingerie I'd never seen her wear. The sudden interest in expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Late nights that stretched into early mornings. "How long have you known?" I asked. 6 weeks. I hired a private investigator after Richard started coming home smelling like her perfume. Chanel No. 5, in case you're wondering. Rather obvious choice. Michelle's new signature scent, the one she claimed was a gift from her sister. "Why are you calling me?" "Because, Mr. Waverly, I believe in fairness. They've been planning their future together, and I think we deserve to plan ours." The word ours hung in the air like smoke. I found myself studying the wedding photo on the side table, Michelle's perfect smile frozen in time. Had she ever looked at me the way she looked at the camera that day? Or had I just been convenient, a stepping stone to something better? "What exactly are you proposing?" "A meeting, tomorrow evening. There's a coffee shop called Meridian on Elm Street. 7 o'clock. I'll bring everything I have, and you can decide what you want to do with the information." I should have hung up, should have confronted Michelle directly, demanded explanations, fought for my marriage like a decent husband would. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'll be there. Thank you, Mr. Waverly. And Jonathan, wear something nice. We're going to be planning a war." The line went quiet, and I sat there holding the phone, listening to the silence of my house. Upstairs, Michelle was probably lying in our bed, maybe texting her lover, maybe planning her next move. Down here, I was apparently planning mine. I finished the whiskey and poured another. Tomorrow I'd learn exactly how thoroughly my wife had betrayed me. Tonight I'd drink to the marriage I thought I had, before I started destroying the one I actually did. The engineering reports lay forgotten on my lap. I had more pressing calculations to make now. Variables like assets, evidence, and revenge. The kind of equations where the solution wasn't a bridge or a building, but the complete demolition of two people who thought they were smarter than everyone around them. Michelle's laughter drifted down from upstairs, soft and musical. Probably on the phone with her sister, she'd tell me tomorrow. Another lie to add to the collection. I raised my glass to the ceiling in a mock toast. "Here's to new partnerships, sweetheart. May yours be everything you deserve." Elizabeth Walsh was nothing like I'd expected. She sat in the corner booth at Meridian, perfectly composed in a navy blazer and pearls, looking more like a senator's wife than a woman whose marriage was falling apart. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and when she stood to shake my hand, her grip was firm and confident. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the manila folder on the table. I wasn't sure you would. Curiosity, I admitted, sliding into the booth across from her. And the need to know exactly how stupid I've been. She smiled at that, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Not stupid, trusting. There's a difference, though. The result is often the same. The waitress brought coffee without being asked, and Elizabeth opened the folder with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. The first photograph hit me like a physical blow. Michelle and Richard Thornton entering the Marriott downtown, his hand on the small of her back, her face turned up to his, with an expression I hadn't seen in years. "This was taken 3 weeks ago," Elizabeth said matter-of-factly. "Thursday afternoon. I believe you were told she had a client meeting that ran late?" I nodded, remembering. Michelle had come home at nearly midnight, complaining about demanding clients and impossible deadlines. I'd heated up her dinner and listened to her vent about her stressful day. The next photograph showed them in the hotel bar, leaning close over drinks. Michelle's hand rested on Richard's thigh, intimate and possessive. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. "Hotel records show they've been meeting there twice a week for the past 2 months," Elizabeth continued. "Always the same suite, always charged to Richard's corporate card, which made it rather easy to track." She spread out more evidence like playing cards, credit card statements showing expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, jewelry purchases that had never made it home to me, a receipt for lingerie from a boutique that cost more than my monthly car payment. "This is very thorough," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I'm a research librarian by training. Thoroughness is my specialty." She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a text message thread. "These are from last week." The messages were explicit without being crude, intimate in a way that spoke of familiarity and planning. Michelle discussing what she'd wear, where they'd go, what they'd do afterward. Richard responding with details about his business trips, invitations for her to join him, promises about their future together. "He's been telling her he'll leave me," Elizabeth said quietly, "that we'll divorce quietly, split everything 50-50, and he'll be free to start over with her. She believes him." "Will he?" Elizabeth's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Richard has never done anything that wasn't in his own best interest. He has no intention of leaving me, because doing so would cost him everything he's worked for. I have an excellent prenup, and more importantly, I have connections he needs for his business." She closed the folder and looked at me directly. "Your wife is a beautiful woman, Jonathan, but she's also a convenience, a trophy, something exciting and new that makes him feel powerful and desired. When the novelty wears off, or when the risk becomes too great, he'll discard her without a second thought." The coffee had gone cold in my cup. I stared at it, processing everything I'd seen and heard. "So what do you want from me?" "Partnership," she said simply. "They've formed an alliance based on lies and selfishness. I propose we form one based on truth and mutual benefit." "What kind of mutual benefit?" Elizabeth smiled, and for the first time, I saw steel beneath the pearls and politeness. "Richard thinks he's untouchable because he's careful, and I'm naive. Michelle thinks she's won the lottery because she's landed a wealthy, powerful man who'll take care of her forever. They're both wrong, and I think it's time they learned that." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is my attorney. She specializes in high-asset divorces and has a particular talent for finding hidden money and proving infidelity. I think you should call her." I took the card, studying the embossed lettering. "And then what?" "Then we coordinate our efforts, file simultaneously, present a united front, make sure they understand that their actions have consequences." She paused, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Richard has worked very hard to build his reputation and his fortune. Michelle has worked very hard to position herself as the perfect corporate wife. I think they should experience what it feels like to lose everything they've built." The rational part of my mind knew I should take time to think, to process, to make sure I wasn't making decisions based on anger and hurt. But the rational part of my mind had also trusted my wife completely, and look where that had gotten me. What's the timeline? My attorney can have papers ready by Friday. Yours can do the same. We serve them simultaneously, present all evidence at once, and watch their carefully constructed world collapse. I thought about Michelle upstairs in our bed, probably texting Richard right now, planning their next encounter while I sat here planning their destruction. The symmetry was almost poetic. There's something else, Elizabeth said, her voice softer now. Something I didn't expect when I called you last night. What's that? I like you, Jonathan. You're nothing like what I imagined. You're thoughtful, intelligent, and you have integrity. Those are rare qualities. The compliment caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had said something genuinely kind about me? When was the last time Michelle had looked at me with anything other than mild irritation or distraction? Thank you, I said. I like you too. You're not what I expected either. What did you expect? Someone bitter, angry, vindictive. Oh, I am vindictive, she said with a smile. I'm just civilized about it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two strangers bound together by betrayal and the desire for justice. Outside, Haven Harbor was settling into its evening routine, families having dinner, couples watching television, normal people living normal lives. Inside this coffee shop, we were planning the systematic destruction of two people we'd once loved. I'll call your attorney tomorrow, I said finally. Good. Elizabeth gathered her papers with the same precision she'd displayed them. And Jonathan? Don't confront Michelle yet. Let her think she's still in control. The surprise will make everything more effective. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. After this is over, after the divorces are final and they're dealing with the consequences of their choices, would you like to have dinner? Somewhere nice. Somewhere honest. The invitation hung between us, loaded with possibility and promise. I'd like that very much. So would I. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Good night, Jonathan. Sweet dreams. I watched her walk away, confident and composed, a woman with a plan and the intelligence to execute it. Then I drove home to my lying wife and my empty marriage, already looking forward to tomorrow. The attorney's office smelled like leather and success. Margaret Chen had the kind of reputation that made other lawyers nervous and wealthy spouses very, very careful. Elizabeth's recommendation had been spot on. Within 10 minutes of our meeting, I knew I was in excellent hands. Infidelity cases are my specialty, Margaret said, reviewing the evidence Elizabeth had provided. And this is particularly well documented. Your wife's lover has been careless, which works in our favor. She spread the photographs across her mahogany desk like a dealer shuffling cards. The hotel records establish a pattern. The credit card statements show financial support. The text messages prove intent and ongoing deception. In Connecticut, we can use all of this. What about assets? That's where it gets interesting. You've been married 8 years, so everything acquired during the marriage is marital property. However, if we can prove she's been planning to leave you for him, and that she's been using marital funds to support the affair, we can argue for a larger share. Margaret pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. Tell me about your finances, joint accounts, individual accounts, real estate investments. I ran through our financial situation, which was more complicated than I'd realized. The house, purchased 3 years ago, joint savings and checking accounts, my 401k and pension from the engineering firm, Michelle's smaller retirement account, life insurance policies, the boat I'd bought last summer and barely used. She's been spending more lately, I said. New clothes, expensive lunches, spa treatments. I assumed it was work-related stress relief. All documented in the credit card statements Elizabeth provided. We'll categorize every expense and determine what was affair-related versus legitimate marital spending. Margaret's pen moved across the paper with practiced efficiency. What about her income? She makes good money at Pinnacle Marketing, 65,000 base plus bonuses. Richard Thornton has been very generous with her bonuses lately. I'm sure he has. Margaret's smile was sharp. That actually helps us. We can argue that the bonuses were compensation for services beyond her job description, which makes them marital assets obtained through adultery. The legal terminology made it all sound clinical, but underneath the professional language was the systematic dismantling of everything Michelle and I had built together. It should have felt more devastating. Instead, it felt like finally taking action after months of passive acceptance. Elizabeth Walsh's attorney is coordinating with us, Margaret continued. We'll file simultaneously on Friday morning. Both spouses served at the same time, maximum impact, minimum opportunity for them to coordinate their response. What happens then? Then the real work begins. Discovery, depositions, negotiations. If they're smart, they'll settle quickly and quietly. If they're not, she shrugged. Well, Connecticut divorce proceedings are public record. The local newspaper loves a good scandal, especially when it involves prominent business figures. The thought of Michelle's private life becoming public entertainment should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I found myself thinking about how much she'd always cared about appearances, about what people thought, about maintaining the perfect image. There's something else you should know, Margaret said, her tone becoming more personal. Elizabeth Walsh is a remarkable woman, intelligent, composed, and absolutely ruthless when crossed. Her husband has no idea what he's unleashed. She's been very kind to me. Has she? Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. She's not known for kindness to people she doesn't respect. I left the attorney's office with a folder full of documents to sign and a timeline that would change everything by the end of the week. The divorce papers would be filed Friday morning. Michelle would be served at her office, Richard at his. By noon, their affair would be a legal matter, documented and public. Driving home, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Elizabeth the night before. We'd met for coffee again, ostensibly to coordinate legal strategies, but the conversation had wandered into more personal territory. She'd told me about her marriage, how Richard had gradually become distant and dismissive, treating her more like a business asset than a wife. I'd shared my own story of growing alienation, of feeling like a stranger in my own home. The irony, she'd said, stirring sugar into her coffee, is that they think they're so clever, so sophisticated, but they're just following the oldest, most predictable script in the world. Powerful man, younger woman, promises of a better life. It's almost boring in its conventionality. What's not boring, I'd replied, is watching it all fall apart. She'd laughed at that, a genuine sound of delight. You have a vindictive streak, Jonathan Waverly. I approve. Now, pulling into my driveway, I saw Michelle's car already there. She'd been coming home earlier lately, probably to avoid suspicion, to maintain the pretense of normalcy. I found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual enthusiasm. How was your day? She asked, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. Productive, I said truthfully. Very productive. Yours? Oh, meetings, deadlines, the usual chaos. She glanced at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Richard's been pushing everyone hard lately. Big client presentation next week. Richard Thornton seems to demand a lot from his employees. He's a perfectionist, but that's what makes him so successful. There was warmth in her voice when she said his name, a fondness she hadn't shown for me in months. I opened a beer and watched her cook, studying her face for signs of guilt or anxiety. But Michelle had always been good at compartmentalizing, at presenting whatever version of herself the situation required. Tonight she was playing the devoted wife, and she was convincing. I was thinking, she said, adding spices to the pan. Maybe we should plan a vacation. Somewhere tropical. We haven't traveled together in ages. That sounds nice. I wondered if this was genuine sentiment or if Richard had suggested she make more effort with her husband to avoid suspicion. When were you thinking? Maybe next month? I'll have to check with work, make sure there aren't any conflicts. Of course, wouldn't want to interfere with Richard's schedule. She looked at me sharply, but I kept my expression neutral, interested but not suspicious. It's not about Richard. It's about client commitments and project deadlines. I know, I was just making conversation. Dinner passed pleasantly enough, Michelle chatting about work gossip and weekend plans, me responding appropriately while mentally reviewing the documents in Margaret's folder. Tomorrow, I'd sign the papers. Thursday, we'd finalize the strategy with Elizabeth's team. Friday, everything would change. You seem distracted, Michelle said as we cleared the dishes. Just work stuff. Big project coming up. Anything I can help with? The question was automatic, polite, the kind of thing married couples ask each other without really meaning it. But for a moment, I was tempted to tell her everything, to lay out the photographs and receipts and text messages and ask her to explain, to give her one last chance to choose our marriage over her affair. Instead, I kissed her forehead and said, "No, but thanks for offering." She smiled and went upstairs to take a bath, probably to text Richard in private, to plan their next encounter while I cleaned the kitchen and prepared for their destruction. 2 more days, and the pretense would be over. 2 more days, and we'd all stop lying to each other. I found myself looking forward to it with an anticipation that surprised me. Not just the justice of it, but the honesty. The relief of finally dealing with truth instead of carefully maintained fiction. Elizabeth had been right about one thing. This was going to be very satisfying. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and crystal-clear skies, the kind of perfect October day that made Haven Harbor look like a postcard. I dressed carefully for work, choosing my best suit and the tie Michelle had given me for Christmas. If this was going to be the day everything changed, I wanted to look the part. Margaret had called the night before to confirm the timeline. Michelle would be served at Pinnacle Marketing at 10:30, during the weekly staff meeting Richard always held in the main conference room. Richard would be served simultaneously at his private office, ensuring they couldn't warn each other or coordinate their response. The process server is experienced with high conflict situations, Margaret had assured me. Professional, discreet, but very thorough. They'll both understand immediately that this is serious. I arrived at my own office early, wanting to be surrounded by the familiar rhythms of work when the phone calls started coming. Engineering problems had clear solutions, unlike the mess my personal life had become. But today, even that was changing. Today, I was taking control. At exactly 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Both packages delivered successfully. Expect contact soon. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 10:47. Jonathan? Michelle's voice was shaky, unfamiliar. I need to come home, right now. We need to talk. I'm at work. This can't wait, please, please, come home. The desperation in her voice should have moved me. 3 months ago, it would have. Now, it just sounded like someone finally facing consequences for their choices. I'll be there in an hour. The drive home felt different, charged with the electricity of approaching storm. I'd been passive for so long, accepting Michelle's explanations and excuses, trying to be understanding and supportive. Today, that version of myself was finished. Michelle's car was in the driveway, parked at an odd angle, as if she'd been in a hurry. I found her in the living room, still wearing her work clothes, the divorce papers spread across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. "How long have you known?" she asked without preamble. "About 6 weeks. I sat down across from her, maintaining distance. "Elizabeth Walsh called me. Nice woman. Very thorough. Michelle's face went pale. Elizabeth called you? We've been working together, comparing notes, planning strategy. You might say we've become quite close. Jonathan, I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. You've always been creative with explanations. I gestured to the papers. But I don't think explanations matter anymore, do you? She picked up the divorce petition, her hands trembling slightly. This is so detailed. The hotel records, the credit cards, the photographs. She looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. I didn't think you had this in you. Neither did I. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. We can fix this, she said, leaning forward. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake, but it doesn't have to end our marriage. I love you, Jonathan. I've always loved you. The words hung between us, and I found myself analyzing them like an engineering problem. Was there any truth in them? Had she ever really loved me, or had I just been convenient, a stable foundation while she built toward something better? When did it start? I asked. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. 6 months ago, the company retreat in Boston, we were working late on a presentation, and he made me feel special, important, like I mattered. And I didn't make you feel that way? You made me feel safe, she said softly, but Richard made me feel alive. The honesty was brutal and unexpected. I'd been prepared for lies, denials, attempts at manipulation. This raw admission was somehow worse. So you chose alive over safe. I chose excitement over routine, passion over comfort. Can you blame me for that? Actually, I could. But I also understood it, which was the most painful part. Our marriage had become comfortable, predictable, easy. We'd stopped trying to impress each other, stopped making effort, stopped seeing each other as anything more than familiar fixtures in a shared life. What did he promise you? Michelle's laugh was bitter. Everything. Divorce from Elizabeth, marriage to me, travel, adventure, a life where I'd never have to worry about money or status or fitting in. He painted this picture of our future together, and I wanted it so badly I ignored every red flag. And now? Now I know he's been lying to me as much as I've been lying to you. His attorney called him this morning. Elizabeth isn't the naive housewife he thought she was. She's going to take him apart piece by piece, and he's already talking about reconciliation, about working things out with her. The phone rang, interrupting us. Michelle glanced at the caller ID and declined the call. Richard? I asked. She nodded. He's been calling all morning, wants to meet to plan our response, to coordinate our stories. But there's no our anymore, is there? There's just him trying to save himself and me left holding the consequences. What consequences? I'll lose my job. He made that clear. Can't have the scandal affecting the company. Can't have his wife seeing my face every day. Can't risk more evidence being created. She laughed again, the sound hollow and defeated. 8 years with the company, and I'll be gone by Monday. I should have felt satisfaction at her downfall, vindication for all the lies and betrayal. Instead, I felt something unexpected, pity. She'd gambled everything on a man who was already abandoning her, and now she was facing the reality of her choices. The house? She asked. Will probably have to be sold. We can't afford the mortgage on my salary alone, and you'll need to find new employment. My car? Paid for with marital assets, so it'll be part of the settlement. She nodded, absorbing each piece of bad news with growing resignation. And us? There is no us, Michelle. There hasn't been for months. You made sure of that. The cruelty of the statement surprised even me, but it was true. She'd chosen Richard over our marriage, excitement over commitment, the promise of something better over the reality of what we had. Now she was discovering that promises from married men weren't worth much when their own interests were threatened. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. You deserved better than this. Yes, I did. The simplicity of my agreement seemed to hit her harder than anger would have. She'd been prepared for fury, for accusations, for emotional scenes. My calm acceptance of her apology and acknowledgement of my worth was somehow more devastating. What happens now? Now you find somewhere else to stay while we work out the details. Margaret Chen is handling my interests, and she's very good at what she does. You should get your own attorney. With what money? That's your problem to solve. The phone rang again. This time, Michelle answered. What do you want, Richard? Her voice was flat, exhausted. No, I can't meet you. No, I can't coordinate anything. You made your choice this morning when you started talking about reconciling with your wife. She listened for a moment, then laughed. You're right, Richard. We are both in trouble. But you're in trouble with a woman who has money, connections, and a very good attorney. I'm in trouble with a man who has integrity, intelligence, and nothing left to lose. Guess which one of us is more dangerous? She hung up and looked at me with something that might have been respect. He's panicking. Elizabeth has frozen their joint accounts, filed for emergency spousal support, and somehow got his company's board of directors to call an emergency meeting about his conduct. She's very thorough. She's very smart. And she likes you. The observation hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to discuss. I'll pack some things, Michelle said, standing up. I can stay with Jess for a few days while I figure out what comes next. I watched her walk upstairs. This woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with, and felt nothing but emptiness where love used to be. She'd chosen her path, and now she was walking it alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. How are you holding up? I typed back, better than expected. You? Surprisingly well. Dinner tonight? I think we both deserve to celebrate. I'd like that very much. Good. I know the perfect place. Somewhere Richard could never afford to take her. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Michelle was upstairs packing the remnants of our marriage. Richard was probably in his office trying to salvage his reputation, and I was making dinner plans with a woman who understood exactly what I'd been through. Sometimes the universe did balance itself perfectly. The restaurant Elizabeth chose was everything she'd promised. Elegant, expensive, and completely beyond Richard's reach, now that his assets were frozen and his reputation in ruins. We sat at a corner table overlooking the harbor, the lights of Haven Harbor twinkling like stars across the dark water. To new beginnings, Elizabeth said, raising her wine glass. To justice served, I replied, touching my glass to hers. We'd both changed clothes since the morning's drama. Elizabeth wore a simple black dress that somehow made her look both sophisticated and approachable. I'd chosen a navy blazer and slacks, wanting to look like a man who was moving forward rather than one who was falling apart. How did Michelle take it? Elizabeth asked. Better than I expected. I think she knew it was coming on some level. The lies were getting harder to maintain. I cut into my steak, savoring the perfectly prepared meat. How about Richard? Complete meltdown. Tears, threats, promises, bargaining. He tried every manipulation technique in his considerable arsenal. Elizabeth's smile was satisfied and slightly predatory. None of it worked. 20 years of marriage teaches you to recognize his patterns. Any regrets? About destroying him? None whatsoever. She paused, considering. About the marriage ending? Some. Not because I'll miss him, but because I invested so much time in something that was ultimately worthless. I understood that feeling perfectly. 8 years with Michelle, building what I thought was a partnership, only to discover it had been a convenience for her, a placeholder while she waited for something better. What's next for you? I asked. Freedom, I hope. The settlement will leave me very comfortable, and I have skills Richard never bothered to learn about. I've been managing our investments for years, building my own portfolio, maintaining my own connections. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. What about you? Honestly, I'm not sure. The house will probably have to go, which means starting over somewhere new. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Where would you go? I've always liked this area. Haven Harbor has good bones, good people. Maybe I'll find something smaller, simpler, focus on work, rebuild from there. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, studying my face in the candlelight. What if you didn't have to start over alone? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and risk. We'd known each other for exactly 1 week, brought together by betrayal and united in revenge. But sitting here, talking easily about everything and nothing, I felt more connected to her than I had to Michelle in years. That's a dangerous question, I said. I'm a dangerous woman. Haven't you figured that out yet? She was right. Beneath the pearls and politeness was someone who had systematically destroyed her husband's life with surgical precision. Someone who had turned his own weapons against him and emerged victorious. Someone who had called a stranger and proposed an alliance that had worked perfectly. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we've both been in marriages where we were undervalued and taken for granted. I'm suggesting that we've both proven we work well together. And I'm suggesting that maybe we shouldn't be so quick to assume this partnership has to end just because the divorces are final. The waiter appeared to refill our wine glasses, giving me a moment to process what she was saying. Elizabeth Walsh was proposing something that went far beyond legal cooperation or friendly support. She was proposing a future together. We barely know each other, I said. We know the most important things. We know we can trust each other. We know we share similar values about loyalty and honesty. We know we're compatible intellectually and strategically. She leaned forward slightly. And we know there's attraction here, even if we haven't acknowledged it directly. She was right about that too. I'd been drawn to her from our first meeting, impressed by her intelligence and composure, intrigued by her combination of vulnerability and strength. But I'd assumed it was just the intensity of our shared situation, the natural bonding that occurs between people facing crisis together. This could be rebound, I said, for both of us. It could be, or it could be something real that grew out of something terrible. Either way, don't we owe it to ourselves to find out? The logic was compelling, but more than that, the possibility was appealing. Elizabeth understood what I'd been through because she'd been through it herself. She'd seen me at my worst and still seemed to like what she found. She'd proven herself trustworthy, intelligent, and capable of fierce loyalty to people who earned it. What would that look like? I asked. Dinner, conversation, time spent getting to know each other without the pressure of legal strategy and revenge planning. She smiled. Novel concept, I know. And if it doesn't work? Then we part as friends who helped each other through a difficult time. No harm done. And if it does work? Then maybe we both get something good out of this mess. Maybe we both get the partnership we thought we had before, but with someone who actually deserves it. I thought about Michelle, probably at her friend's house right now, calling Richard and getting sent to voicemail. I thought about Richard, probably in his empty house, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. I thought about the loneliness I'd felt for months, the sense of being invisible in my own marriage, the gradual erosion of hope and connection. Then I looked at Elizabeth, intelligent and beautiful and genuinely interested in what I had to say, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: possibility. I'd like that, I said. I'd like to see what this could become. Her smile was radiant, transforming her face completely. Good, because I've already been imagining what our life could look like, and it's much better than anything I had with Richard. Tell me. Honesty. Real conversation. Shared decisions and mutual respect. Travel to places we both want to see, not just places that impress other people. A home that feels like a refuge instead of a showpiece. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. And passion, Jonathan. Real passion between two people who choose each other every day, not just people who are convenient for each other. The vision she painted was everything I'd thought I'd had with Michelle and everything I'd realized I'd been missing. It was also everything I'd given up hoping for, resigned to the idea that comfortable companionship was the best I could expect from marriage. "That sounds perfect," I said. "Almost too good to be true." The best things usually do. But we've both learned the hard way that settling for less than we deserve doesn't protect us from getting hurt. It just guarantees we'll be unhappy while we wait for the inevitable disappointment. She was right again. Playing it safe hadn't saved my marriage or protected me from betrayal. Being understanding and accommodating hadn't earned Michelle's loyalty or affection. Maybe it was time to try a different approach. Maybe it was time to reach for something that could actually make me happy. "So, what's the first step?" I asked. "This," she said, gesturing to the table between us. "Getting to know each other as people instead of allies. Learning what we like, what we want, what we dream about when we're not planning revenge." "And the second step?" "That depends on how the first step goes, but I'm optimistic." She raised her glass again. "To finding out what we could become together." "To taking chances on good things," I replied. We touched glasses again, and this time it felt like more than a toast. It felt like a promise, a commitment to explore whatever was growing between us. It felt like the beginning of something that could be extraordinary if we were brave enough to let it develop. Outside, Haven Harbor sparkled in the darkness, beautiful and full of possibility. Inside, two people who had started the day ending their marriages were discovering they might be ready to begin something entirely new. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the kitchen of Elizabeth's house, making coffee and marveling at how quickly everything had changed. The divorce proceedings were moving forward with ruthless efficiency. Michelle had moved out of state to stay with her sister, and Richard had been quietly forced to resign from Pinnacle Marketing after the board decided his conduct was incompatible with the company's values. "Good morning," Elizabeth said, appearing in the doorway wearing one of my shirts and looking better than anyone had a right to look before coffee. "Good morning, beautiful." I handed her a mug, still amazed that this was my life now. "Sleep well?" "Perfectly. You?" "Like a man with a clear conscience and excellent company." She laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth. We'd been spending most nights together, either at her house or my apartment, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. It should have felt rushed or reckless, but instead it felt natural, like we were simply catching up to where we should have been all along. "Margaret called yesterday," I said, settling into the breakfast nook beside her. "Michelle's attorney wants to expedite the settlement. Apparently she's eager to put this behind her and start fresh somewhere else. Probably wise. Haven Harbor isn't exactly friendly territory for her anymore." Elizabeth curled up against my side, fitting perfectly under my arm. "Richard's attorney called too. He's agreed to all my terms without negotiation. I think he just wants it over." "Any regrets about being so thorough in your destruction of him?" "None whatsoever. He made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. Besides," she smiled up at me, "if I hadn't been thorough, we might never have met." It was true. If Elizabeth had been less methodical in gathering evidence, less strategic in her approach, less willing to reach out to me, we'd both still be trapped in marriages that were slowly destroying us. Instead, we were here, building something real and honest and infinitely better than what we'd lost. "What's the timeline looking like?" I asked. "Both divorces should be final within 6 weeks. After that—" She trailed off, suddenly looking uncertain. "After that what?" "After that, I was hoping you might consider making this arrangement more permanent." The suggestion shouldn't have surprised me. We'd been practically living together, making decisions as a couple, planning a future that included both of us. But hearing it stated directly made it real in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. What kind of permanent? The kind where we stop maintaining two residences and start building one life together. The kind where we make it official that we're partners in everything, not just revenge. I set down my coffee mug and turned to face her fully. Elizabeth Walsh, are you proposing to me? Not proposing marriage, not yet, but proposing commitment, partnership, a real relationship built on choice rather than circumstance. She took my hands in hers. I'm proposing that we stop treating this like it might be temporary and start treating it like what it is. The best thing that's happened to either of us in years. She was right, as usual. What we had was extraordinary, built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine attraction, and proven compatibility. We'd seen each other at our worst and our best. We'd worked together under pressure and come out stronger. We'd been honest about our flaws and our hopes, and found that we liked what we discovered. I'd like that very much, I said. But I have one condition. What's that? We do this right. No rushing, no assumptions, no taking each other for granted. We keep choosing each other deliberately, every day, because we want to be together, not because it's convenient or comfortable. Agreed. Anything else? Complete honesty. Always. Even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. Especially then. Especially then, she agreed. What else? We protect this. What we have is rare and valuable, and we don't let outside pressures or other people's opinions or our own fears sabotage it. Absolutely. She leaned closer, her eyes serious. And we remember that we're both capable of being ruthless when something we love is threatened. Anyone who tries to come between us or hurt what we're building will discover exactly what Richard and Michelle learned. We're much more dangerous together than apart. The promise was both romantic and slightly menacing, which seemed perfect for us. We'd found each other through betrayal and revenge, but we'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. Now we were committed to protecting it with the same intensity we'd used to destroy our enemies. So it's settled, I said. We're officially partners in everything. Partners in everything, she agreed, sealing the deal with a kiss that tasted like coffee and promise and the future we were going to build together. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Margaret Chen's name appeared on the screen. Jonathan, I have news, Margaret said without preamble. Michelle's attorney called this morning. She wants to settle immediately, no negotiation, your terms exactly as proposed. She'll sign whatever you want, as long as it's final. What changed? Apparently, she's been contacted by several potential employers who've heard about the circumstances of her departure from Pinnacle Marketing. Her reputation in the industry is compromised. She needs this resolved so she can start rebuilding her career somewhere else. I looked at Elizabeth, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with interest. She nodded encouragingly. Accept it, I said. Let's get this finished. Excellent. I'll have the papers drawn up today. You could be officially divorced by the end of next week. After I hung up, Elizabeth pulled out her own phone and called her attorney. The conversation was brief and efficient, ending with the same result. Richard had agreed to settle immediately on her terms, wanting to salvage what little he could from his reputation and finances. Well, Elizabeth said, setting down her phone, it looks like we're both going to be free much sooner than expected. How do you feel about that? Relieved. Excited. Ready to close this chapter and start the next one. She smiled. How about you? The same and grateful. For what? For you, for this, for the fact that their betrayal led us to each other. I pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against me. They thought they were so smart, so sophisticated, playing their little games and telling their clever lies, but in the end, they gave us the greatest gift possible. They freed us to find something real. Something real, she repeated, her voice soft with wonder. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. We'll never forget again. I promise you that. Outside, Haven Harbor was waking up to another beautiful day, the harbor sparkling in the morning sun, the town bustling with the comfortable rhythms of people living honest lives. Inside, two people who had started as strangers, united by betrayal, were planning a future built on trust, passion, and the kind of partnership that could withstand anything. Michelle and Richard had taught us what we didn't want. Now we were free to pursue what we did, each other, and the extraordinary life we were going to build together. The final divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning in November, exactly 2 months after Elizabeth had first called me. I signed them at my kitchen table while she made breakfast, the mundane domesticity of the moment making the legal milestone feel both significant and surprisingly anticlimactic. "That's it," I said, setting down the pen. "Officially divorced. How does it feel? Like closing a book I should have finished reading years ago?" I handed her the papers to witness my signature. "Your turn." Elizabeth signed her own decree with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything, her handwriting neat and decisive. When she finished, she looked up at me with a smile that was pure satisfaction. "Free at last," she said. "Free at last," I agreed. We'd been planning this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, I felt oddly peaceful rather than celebratory. The anger and hurt that had driven me through the initial stages of divorce had faded, replaced by something much better, genuine happiness with the life I was building. "I have something for you," Elizabeth said, disappearing into the living room and returning with a small wrapped box. "What's the occasion?" "New beginnings. Open it." Inside was a key, obviously new, attached to a keychain, with our address engraved on it. "Elizabeth, I know we said we'd take things slowly, but we've been living together for 6 weeks, and it's been perfect. I want to make it official. I want this to be our home, not just my house where you happen to spend most of your time." The gesture was simple but profound. She wasn't just offering me a place to live. She was offering me partnership, belonging, a future built on choice rather than circumstance. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. You belong here, Jonathan, with me. This is where you're supposed to be." I kissed her then, pouring all my gratitude and affection and hope into the connection between us. She was right. I did belong here, not just in her house, but in her life, in her plans, in her heart. "I love you," I said, the words coming easily and naturally. "I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." We held each other in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of our shared life. Coffee cups, morning newspapers, the comfortable clutter of two people who had stopped being careful around each other. Outside, the harbor was gray and choppy under November clouds, but inside, we were warm and safe and exactly where we belonged. The phone rang, interrupting our moment. Elizabeth glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "It's Richard's attorney." "Answer it. Let's see what he wants." Elizabeth put the call on speaker. "This is Elizabeth. Mrs. Darrow, I'm calling to inform you that my client has completed his relocation to Florida and wanted me to convey his apologies for the situation that led to your divorce." Elizabeth and I exchanged glances. Richard apologizing was unexpected and probably insincere, but interesting nonetheless. "How thoughtful of him," Elizabeth said dryly. "Is there something specific he needs?" "He wanted to make sure you knew that he's not contesting any aspect of the settlement and that he has no intention of returning to Connecticut or having any contact with you or Mr. Waverly in the future." "Good to know. Anything else?" "He also wanted me to tell you that he realizes now what he lost when he chose to have the affair, that you were a better wife than he deserved, and that he hopes you'll be happy." The admission was startling in its honesty. Richard, who had never acknowledged fault or responsibility for anything, was admitting that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd destroyed something valuable for something worthless. "Thank you for passing that along," Elizabeth said. "Please tell your client that I am indeed very happy, happier than I ever was with him." After she hung up, we sat in silence for a moment, processing the unexpected apology. "Do you think he means it?" I asked. "Probably. Richard's many things, but he's not stupid. He's had 2 months to watch his life fall apart while ours got better. He's probably figured out that he traded a woman who loved him for one who was using him, and that it cost him everything." "Any regrets about being so thorough in destroying him?" "None. He made his choices, and they had consequences. The fact that he's finally mature enough to acknowledge his mistakes doesn't change what he did or what he deserved." She was right, as usual. Richard's belated recognition of his errors didn't erase the months of lies and betrayal. It didn't undo the damage he'd caused or the pain he'd inflicted. It was simply acknowledgement of reality, probably motivated more by self-pity than genuine remorse. "What about Michelle?" I asked. "Any word from her?" "Margaret mentioned that she's found a job in Denver. Marketing coordinator for a small firm, significant step down from where she was, but it's a fresh start." Elizabeth studied my face. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, mostly. She's far away, starting over, and hopefully learning something from the experience. I don't wish her ill, but I don't want her in my life either." "Very mature of you." "I learned from an excellent teacher." Elizabeth laughed. "I prefer strategically minded to mature, but I'll take the compliment." The rest of the day passed quietly, both of us savoring the simple pleasure of being officially free to build our future together. We walked along the harbor, had lunch at our favorite restaurant, spent the evening reading together in comfortable silence. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of day that would have been impossible with our former spouses but felt natural and right with each other. That night, lying in bed together, Elizabeth traced patterns on my chest with her fingertip. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How different everything is from 6 months ago. How much better." "Any regrets?" "About divorcing Michelle? None. About the way we handled it? None. About finding you?" I turned to face her. "That's the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though it came from something terrible? Especially because it came from something terrible. We both know what it's like to be betrayed, to be taken for granted, to settle for less than we deserve. We'll never do that to each other because we know how much it costs." "Promise?" "I promise. Do you?" "I promise." She kissed me softly. "We're going to be extraordinary together, Jonathan Waverly." "We already are." Outside, Haven Harbor settled into sleep, the lights in the harbor winking out one by one as the town prepared for another day. Inside, 2 people who had found each other through betrayal and revenge were building something that would last, a partnership based on choice, honesty, and the kind of love that comes from truly seeing and valuing each other. Michelle and Richard had given us the greatest gift possible, though they'd never intended to. They'd freed us to find what we actually wanted instead of settling for what we thought we could get. They'd taught us what we wouldn't tolerate and shown us what we truly valued. Now they were gone, living with the consequences of their choices, while we were here, living with the rewards of ours. It was, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, the most perfect justice imaginable. I moved the last box into what was now officially our house on a warm spring morning, 6 months after the divorces were final. Elizabeth had insisted on redecorating, wanting the space to reflect both of us, rather than just her previous life with Richard. "That's the last of it," I said, setting the box down in what would be my home office. "How does it feel?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "Like home, like where I'm supposed to be." And it did. Every room held evidence of our partnership, books we'd chosen together, furniture that reflected both our tastes, photographs from trips we'd taken, artwork we'd discovered at local galleries. It was a home built by 2 people who genuinely liked each other, who made decisions together, who had created something beautiful from honest collaboration. "I have news," Elizabeth said, her voice carrying a note of excitement. "Good news, I hope?" "The best. I got a call from the library system yesterday. They want me to head up their new digital archives project. It's exactly the kind of work I've always wanted to do, and it pays extremely well." "That's wonderful. Congratulations." "There's more. They specifically mentioned that they were impressed by my research skills and attention to detail. Apparently, my work on our divorce cases has become something of a legend in legal circles." I laughed. "You're famous for being thorough in destroying your enemies." "I prefer to think of it as being famous for protecting what matters to me." She was right, as always. Elizabeth's systematic approach to gathering evidence and building cases hadn't been about cruelty or revenge. It had been about justice and protection. She'd used her considerable skills to ensure that people who had betrayed trust faced appropriate consequences. "What about you?" she asked. "Any word on the Portland project?" "They approved the proposal. I'll be designing the new waterfront development, biggest project of my career." I turned in her arms, studying her face. "It means I'll be traveling more, spending time on site." "I know, I'm proud of you." "You're not worried about the time apart?" "Not even slightly. We're not Richard and Michelle, Jonathan. We don't need constant supervision to remain faithful to each other. We choose this relationship every day because we want to be here, not because we're afraid of being alone." She was absolutely right. What we had was built on trust, mutual respect, and genuine affection. We didn't need to monitor each other's phones or worry about business trips because we'd both learned the difference between a partnership and a convenience. "Besides," she continued with a mischievous smile, "absence makes the heart grow fonder, and the reunions more interesting. I like the way you think. I know you do. It's one of your most attractive qualities." We spent the morning arranging my books in the office, creating a space that was mine, but integrated into our shared home. It was a perfect metaphor for our relationship. Two individuals who had maintained their separate identities while building something together that was stronger than either could have created alone. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Elizabeth went to answer it and returned with a large flower arrangement and a card. "Who are they from?" I asked. She read the card and smiled. "Margaret Chen. Congratulations on our new home and best wishes for our future together." That's thoughtful of her. She also included a note about Michelle and Richard. "Oh?" Apparently, they tried to reconnect a few months ago. Michelle reached out to Richard when she was having trouble finding work, and he flew to Denver to see her. And it lasted exactly 3 days before they realized they had nothing in common except their mutual selfishness and their shared history of betraying people who loved them. Elizabeth's laugh was delighted. They're both alone now, and likely to stay that way. The information should have felt like vindication, but instead, it just felt sad. Two people who had destroyed their marriages for each other had discovered that what they'd thought was love was just excitement, novelty, and mutual validation. When the thrill wore off, there was nothing left but the memory of what they'd lost and the recognition of what they'd never really had. "I almost feel sorry for them," I said. "Almost?" "They made their choices. We all live with consequences." "Yes, we do." Elizabeth moved closer, her expression becoming serious. "Speaking of choices, I have something to ask you." "What's that?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "Elizabeth, I know we said we'd take things slowly, but we've been living as partners for 8 months now. We've proven we work well together under pressure, that we make good decisions as a team, that we genuinely enjoy each other's company." She opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "I love you, Jonathan Waverly. I love our life together. I love who I am when I'm with you. Will you marry me?" The proposal was unexpected and perfect, just like everything else about our relationship. Elizabeth had never been conventional, never followed traditional scripts, never waited for other people to make things happen. She saw what she wanted and went after it with intelligence, determination, and complete honesty about her intentions. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." She slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, like everything else about us. Then she kissed me with the passion and tenderness that had characterized our relationship from the beginning, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where I belonged. "When?" I asked. "Soon. Small ceremony, just us and a few close friends. Nothing fancy or complicated, just honest vows between two people who choose each other freely." Perfect. And it was. Everything about our relationship had been honest, direct, and built on genuine compatibility rather than convenience or compromise. Our wedding would be the same. A celebration of what we'd built together and a commitment to keep building it for the rest of our lives. Later that evening, we sat on our deck overlooking the harbor, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. The town was settling into its evening rhythms, families having dinner, couples walking along the waterfront, normal people living normal, honest lives. "Any regrets?" Elizabeth asked, her head resting on my shoulder. "About what?" "About the way we met, about the revenge, about destroying two people who probably didn't deserve quite as thorough a demolition as they got." I considered the question seriously. Richard and Michelle had betrayed their spouses, lied consistently, and planned to build their happiness on the wreckage of their marriages. They'd shown no consideration for the people they were hurting, and no remorse for their choices until they faced consequences. "No regrets," I said finally. "They made their choices, and we responded appropriately. If we'd been less thorough, less strategic, we might never have found each other. And that would have been the real tragedy. I love you, Jonathan. I love you too, Elizabeth. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the harbor lights begin to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Somewhere out there, Michelle was probably working late at her new job, trying to rebuild a career damaged by her own poor choices. Somewhere else, Richard was probably alone in whatever small apartment he could afford, wondering how he'd managed to lose everything that mattered for something that had never been real. But here, in our home, surrounded by the evidence of our partnership and the promise of our future together, two people who had started as victims had become something much better: lovers, partners, and soon, husband and wife. We'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to us and transformed it into the best thing that ever could. We'd found each other through betrayal and built something beautiful from the wreckage of our former lives. It was, I thought, as Elizabeth's engagement ring caught the last light of the setting sun, the most perfect ending imaginable, and the most perfect beginning, too.